Welcome back to Varsity College Football, your home for only college football. Happy to be back with a full episode. Been a while. Got a lot of shorts going up on the channel recently with all the changes in college football. Washington losing to Board, Bama, Jed Fish to Washington, leaving Arizona, which was crazy. A ton of stuff. Commits, Julian saying, Caleb Downs to Ohio State building a super team, all that. We got all that in shorts, but now we're back to focusing on full episodes as well. Thank you for tuning in. So don't be afraid to leave a like and please subscribe. Really helps out the channel. And if you want me to talk about something, we got a long off season to go here, folks. So if you want me to talk about a team, a conference, an individual player, some kind of commit, leave it in the comment section. Won't be afraid to talk about it. Would love to dive into stuff that y'all want to talk about on this channel. But for today, let's go ahead and huddle up and see what we're going to talk about. Obviously, Sherrone Moore was named the head coach of the University of Michigan yesterday. Texas's opportunity in the SEC. This is an interesting one. Very interesting topic right there. How are they going to slide into that top level of the SEC? Is there a team that's ever been more prepared in the history of joining the SEC than Texas currently is? We'll talk about that. Then we got commit and portal updates, which is really the big things we got going right now. And obviously Jim Harbaugh just left and the 30-day portal windows for Bama, Michigan, all that, and Washington. But commit and portal updates, anything you may have missed or some of the big things, we're going to go in and hit the topics on those. Sherrone Moore is the new head coach at the University of Michigan. More coaching, less problems. Great hire. Obviously, he kind of had like a tryout, which is kind of funny, makes sense why the coaching search wasn't so extensive or anything. There was smoke, there was Leipold, Kleiman, a little bit of Brian Kelly smoke, nothing like really definitive or that important. Everyone kind of knew it was going to be more, and they moved on it quickly, which is smart because in this new era, the turnover of a coaching hire is basically a nightmare in this new college football world that we are in. So you don't want to do that. And I think the way the players spoke about Sherrone Moore really speaks volumes about him as not only a coach, but also a man, of them wanting to play for them and keep them, which is why you haven't really seen when Harbaugh left, there wasn't like a big exodus yet. That 30-day portal window for Michigan is open. I don't even think anyone's left yet. So that's huge for him. And he also had the tryout. Like I said, he won their biggest games of the season besides the playoffs as the head coach. And you can see the passion that the man has. And I think his youth as well really relates to these kids in this new era of college football. Not only that, but he also, to me, kind of has this old school feel to him. There's so much passion when you see Sherrone Moore talk about the sport of football. I know that everyone was joking on him like Harbaugh didn't die when they won the Penn State game and he was like crying. That was a little over the top, but you can tell just outside of that, just in interviews or even the stories about him, that how passion-filled he is about football, which obviously doesn't mean that he's going to be some insane coach. But the thing about him that reads in with his passion is his physicality. His 6 seasons, some as the offensive line coach and then the offensive coordinator, has really spoken to how he's been able to develop this line of scrimmage for Michigan. And I think he can take that physicality and not only start it from the lines or the line of scrimmage, but spread it out to the rest of the team. And I think this team can actually have an even more physical identity under Sherrone Moore than it even did under Harbaugh. And I think they can rise that up even more. I can't think of the word, but that's huge. And I mean, listen to this. Michigan has been ranked top 15 in scoring offense each of the past 3 seasons under Moore's direction. The Wolverines have put out some of the best offensive lines. They had the Joe Moore Award in 2021 and 2022. And with that offensive line has allowed Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards to go off. They've had a running back rush for over 1,000 yards in all 3 years while Moore has been the coordinator. So it works. His system works. The way he's able to coach works. And I just think this is an excellent hire. Obviously, you could have gotten a more experienced guy who would have been older, but I think this is perfect. You got a guy who, if he is successful, you got him on a good contract, and you have players that relate to him, and he's going to understand this world a lot more than some of the older coaches. Obviously, there are other older coaches who are way more experienced, like Brian Kelly's been successful everywhere he's been, but this one just made sense because if you lose Sherrone, or if you don't hire Sherrone Moore, the kind of foundation that was built crumbles, and you bring in a whole new just personality and identity to the program, which may not work. And a Brian Kelly situation, I keep thinking Brian Kelly because that's who I thought it was going to be if it wasn't going to be Sherrone Moore. I feel like it would have been like a Rich Rod part 2. But I just want to go into now some comments Paul Feinbaum had about Sherrone Moore. Now, this was before he was hired. So I think this was a day before he was hired. He said they will most likely hire Sherrone Moore, but he said there is going to be an issue around him. And Paul Feinbaum says, don't forget, the Big Ten is not what it was this year. You've got those 4 schools coming over from the Pac-12. On top of that, here are 2 things that Sherrone Moore will probably have to worry about. Second week of the season at the Big House, you're playing Texas, which, as we know, was in the Final Four. Texas is going to be one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country. And at the end of the season, you go to Columbus, and this is not this year's Ohio State team. He talks about how they loaded up and got all the players. And he said Ryan Day will likely be either number 1 or number 2 in the preseason. You don't want to lose to Ohio State in your first season at Michigan. Jim Harbaugh knows all about that. Now, obviously, it's hard to take over a newer program. You're a fresh, rookie head coach at a school that just won a national championship, 3 Big Ten titles, insane expectations. You finally put that Ohio State crap to rest of just getting bodied every year. But here's the thing. He mentions the Big 12 or the Pac-12 schools coming over. Feinbaum does. But obviously, this is Feinbaum. I'm not going to go, I don't want to say anything necessarily, but he's outspoken a lot more in the past few years of just kind of craziness I call headline sayings. But he said, you got the 4 schools coming over from the Pac-12. Okay, let's count them. USC, nobody's scared of that. Maybe a quarterback every here and there because it's Lincoln Riley. The rest of it, nobody's scared. Washington is kind of like Bambi's mom. Was it Bambi's mom in Bambi? Yeah, at the beginning, you're like, oh, it's so nice. It's kind of like the little family. It was kind of like that's how Washington was. They were rising up. They're like, this is cool. We're going to see Washington be a top program now in college football. Boom. That's gone. Washington's not that scary anymore unless Jed Fish kind of figures it out. But it doesn't look bright going into the Big Ten now. And then you have UCLA. No one's scared of that in the Big Ten. Who am I missing? Oh, Oregon. Yeah, obviously. The only one to be scared of who can challenge you. Oregon is really the only school. And then he goes into you're playing Texas, and then you play Ohio State. First off, Paul, we're in the 12-team playoff era now. I don't think anyone's going to expect Sherrone Moore to necessarily go undefeated his first year. He could lose that Texas game and that Ohio State game and still make the college football playoff. Don't worry about that. I don't know. This wasn't really as big of a deal as I'm making it to be, but I just thought the comments were just kind of, I don't know, ill will. I don't know. I don't want to say anything stupid about Paul, but I don't know. I wouldn't be worried about the schedule. Yes, it's going to be tough, way tougher than last year, but we're in a whole new era of college football now starting this year. Don't worry about that crap. Don't worry about it. Sherrone Moore, congratulations, Michigan's fans. Good hire. Keep that roster together. It does suck. You did lose Minter, which he kind of built on top of, I think, was it McDonald, the coordinator in 2021. He is now the coordinator for the Ravens. He kind of built and perfected that defense, but still, he's going to be able to put a staff together. I'm not worried. At a place like Michigan, people want to go coach at Michigan, so not worried about that. All right, now let's talk Texas's SEC opportunity. So, as I was saying, I don't know at the beginning, I don't know if there's ever been a team in the expansions of SEC's history who looks more ready to come into the league, especially in this new era where everything is a lot harder. But I basically I just dropped my pen, but Texas, this might be an overstatement, I don't know, but they have the potential to take Alabama's chair at the big boy table. I'm not saying DeBoer's not going to work out. I'm not saying we don't know. We can't know anything about that. But right now, what we know about Texas is they have a chance. It looks like there's an opening at that table, and Georgia's the only one really at that table right now, at the big boy table. Texas has a chance to sit there and establish themselves as a power at the top, sliding right in, which would make Texas A&M fans just lose their absolute minds. But it's going to be hard going into 2024, losing the wide receivers that you lost. You had Worthy and Mitchell, but there's so much that you've added in this wide receiver room where I wouldn't be worried. You're going to be fine once I go into this. You even lost Devondre Sweat and Byron Murray on defense, but the problem is, or not the problem, your defense will be better against the run in 2024, I believe, especially with the linebacker room up front. You're going to have returning sack leader Ethan Burke, along with Trey Moore from UTSA, who's a dog, and Anthony Hill Jr. The rush defense, like I said, will be up there. The physicality and production that this defense and the experience is going to have in 2024 is going to be up there and going to be able to handle the physicality, the grind in the SEC week in, week out, no problem. But for the receivers, like I said, you have the number 4 recruiting class coming in for this year. And then you have Ryan Wingo, who's one of those key players who could easily step up at wide receiver. Ryan Wingo is a stud. And then you have the transfer portal additions, wide receivers, Isaiah Bond from Alabama, Silas Bolden from Oregon State, who is very good. Really not talked about nationally enough. This kid's really good. And then you have Matthew Golden from Houston, but you had Bond at Alabama, who transfers in for Texas, who was he was second in yards on the team. He would have been first in yards if Texas A&M didn't let Jermaine Burton look like prime Randy Moss and make 0 adjustments to him the entire game, but it was also still a Jimbo Fisher-led team, so we're not surprised. But he also for me, painful. He had the game-winning touchdown catch on the 4th and 31 in the Iron Bowl. I watched that live. That sucked. But incredible player. He led Alabama in receptions. Great get. Going to be just plug-and-play guy for them. Then you also have Silas, who is just a playmaker at Oregon State. He led the team in receptions, yards, and he was second in receiving touchdowns. 54 receptions, 746 yards, 5 receiving touchdowns. He even had 2 rushing touchdowns. So they had a few plays for him where he ran 9 carries for 84 yards. Punt return for a touchdown. This is the funny thing is, I guess this is why he's kind of overlooked, even though he did a lot for Oregon State. He's 5'8", 157, but he's basically the embodiment of you can't measure size, or you can't measure heart, but you can measure size, whatever that is. But he was back-to-back second-team All-Pac-12. That kid is going to be a playmaker for Texas. You do not want him to get into open space. He can even run routes. His footwork is fantastic. He can run with the rest of them. He's so fast, and he can be a possession receiver at the same time. So really, he's just a jack of all trades. He's like a Swiss Army knife wide receiver, just a little Swiss Army knife. And then you have Matthew Golden, the guy from Houston. He's basically the last 2 years at Houston has been almost the same receiver outside of his yards. 38 receptions this year for 404 yards and 6 touchdowns. In 2022, he had 38 receptions for 584 yards and 7 touchdowns. You basically know what you're going to get with Golden. He's very consistent. He's got good size, and he had 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns as well this year, so he's got some speed on him. And he was second team all Big 12. So you have a ton of veteran experience coming into the wide receiver room at Texas, who just lost a lot out of the wide receiver room. But this could be a better wide receiver room strictly with production outside of talent, which, I mean, obviously they had both last year, Worthy and Mitchell and everybody. But this just seems like a room where it's not dependent on 1 or 2 guys necessarily. You can spread the ball out to everyone for Quinn Ewers. And then also we're going to move to the defensive side of the ball, because this is one of the players that I was just fingers crossed when he entered the portal. He went to my school. But Trey Moore, just the absolute beast linebacker at a UTSA. Literally everybody wanted him. Texas basically beat out Alabama and Ohio State to get him. He was the AAC Defensive Player of the Year, first team all ACC. Not ACC, AAC. Last season, he had 45 tackles, 30 were solo, 17 and a half tackles for loss, 14 sacks, a forced fumble, and an interception. And he wasn't just a flash in the pan either. I mean, the year before in 2022, he had 56 tackles, 28 solos, 8 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. He's a highly effective run defender. He wins at the point of attack coming off the edge. He's going to be elite, especially with what you lost this year. That linebacker core for Texas is going to be nasty. So of any team, like I said, to come in through the SEC, Texas, like seriously, obviously college football playoff contender, but then go to Atlanta year 1 and they can win the SEC coming in this year. And like you can say the Big 12 is soft with the line of scrimmage. It's different, but Sark has been prepping this team. He's been building them. He's been recruiting. He's been portaling. He's been able to develop as good as anyone, and he runs an insane offense. So this team is not, I don't think they're going to have that road bump coming in. And the only team really in terms ahead of them in line of scrimmage and physicality and all of that, just like basically probably anybody else in the country, is the Georgia Bulldogs and Kirby Smart. But you have Quinn Ewers going to year 3. This is basically a recipe for success. Like I said, you have the big boy table basically opening. And then, I mean, you look at the schedule, and I mean, the away games are tough, but it's still manageable, especially in the 12-team playoff era. So you start with Colorado State at Michigan. That's going to be an awesome game. Like I talked about earlier, UTSA, ULM, Mississippi State, or not home against Oklahoma. You have Oklahoma and then Georgia back-to-back, which sucks. But you get Georgia at home. And then you go to Vandy. You get Florida at home. You go to Arkansas, which will be Arkansas Super Bowl on their schedule next year. But by that time, Sam Pittman may be fired, and it could just all be burning down. Or Bobby Petrino will be lighting it back up for the Razorbacks, getting that audition, maybe a Sherrone Moore like ending for the Razorback season next year there, but probably not. And then you have Kentucky, and then at Texas A&M. Obviously, the rivalry is so back, but it's doable. And then I just want to add on to this too. I just think this is the perfect time in this era of college football, and for this all to be merging. This was the perfect time for this transition. It was announced a few years ago. Everyone was like, ooh, this will be tough, for the Big 12 teams coming in. I don't think it's going to be tough for Texas at all. I think Texas is just going to slot in there right under Georgia this year. And obviously you have to maintain it, but I think they can. Oklahoma, they had a good year last year, obviously revived under Brent Venables, but you got a freshman quarterback coming in with Arnold, and they don't really feel threatening. And obviously Oklahoma's schedule is just an absolute nightmare. Obviously there was jokes like, oh, Texas paid officials in the SEC to give them a harder schedule, which I thought that was a hilarious joke, but obviously not. But Oklahoma, I think, is going to have a rough year next year. And it's really going to suck for them because I think Texas is obviously, I think Texas is going to go to the college football playoff. I think they can win the SEC. And I think they're just going to slot in at the big boy table with Georgia and possibly take Alabama's spot. Not like, I know people are going to take that out of context, like, oh, they're not better Alabama all the time, all that crap. I just mean in terms of the current era that we're in. So Texas primed for a big start in the SEC. Longhorns fans, you have a lot to be happy about. It must be nice. Now let's get to portal and commit updates. I want to start with Tennessee. Tennessee's had a big week. It's kind of been overshadowed with a bunch of other stuff coming in, just DeBoer stuff, the Ryan Williams things, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Tennessee, I mean, they've had a really good week. You had Lance Hurd transfer in from LSU, the former 5-star who appeared in 12 games as a true freshman last season and was most likely probably going to start for LSU again this year on the offensive line. You have him coming in, which was a huge addition. You got Jackson Moy, the Stanford D lineman who transferred. Not a lot of noise around the kid, but the thing is he's appeared in all 24 games while he's been at Stanford. He has a ton of experience, good size, and he's got 2 years of eligibility remaining. So he can become a good impact player on the defensive line for the Vols, maybe even coming in this year or even in the future. So that's great depth piece, if not going to start regardless. And then obviously from the transfer portal, this is an older news, but I want to throw this in there with their sneaky transfer portal class. People keep forgetting they also added the wide receiver Brazil from Tulane, who had 44 receptions, 711 yards, and 5 touchdowns. 6'5", 16.2 per reception in 2023. He was a big part of the success in Tulane with Willie Fritz and I just blanked on the quarterback's name, but you know who he is. That was huge. And then, so outside of Brazil, that was old news. But recently, this past week, on top of that, George McIntyre committed to Tennessee. The number 2 quarterback in the class of 2025, the 9th-ranked player nationally, insane arm, incredible arm strength, and he's 6'6". And if he's most likely going to commit, obviously these bigger QB commits, well, it's a new world. You never know. I'm not going to promise anything. But if he does stay with Tennessee, he would be the first ESPN 300 quarterback from the state of Tennessee to commit to Tennessee. Obviously, they have ESPN 300 quarterbacks basically as their quarterback room right now. But like I said, the QB room going forward is going to be insane. You got Nico at QB right now. I don't want to say his last name because I can never get it right. He was the number 2 player nationally. And then you have Jake Merklinger, who comes in this current cycle, who was a 4-star, the number 13th QB nationally. He was probably rated a little bit low, should have been rated higher. He's insanely accurate, great touch. He was 42-10 in high school, like 42 touchdowns, I think. But just absolutely insane. And the best part about this George McIntyre thing, which is an insane get, that quarterback room is going to be ridiculous. And they're kind of going to stack on top of each other where they're going to be able to learn under each other. Obviously, if they all stay, I think they will. But you can never guarantee anything now in this world of college football. But George McIntyre, for people who don't know, his grandfather, who he's named after, is one of the greatest Vanderbilt head coaches of all time. So he goes to the rival school of his family. His grandfather coached at Vandy from 1979 through 1985, and his big highlight was the 1982 Vandy team, who went 8-4, ended the year on a 5-game win streak. And his grandpa actually won the SEC Coach of the Year that year for Vandy, and he gave them their first 8-win season in 27 years and first bowl appearance in 8 years. So that was huge. I mean, you just got an incredible quarterback, but also I just find it funny that you get a kid whose grandpa is like, I mean, it's Vanderbilt football, so there's not much history, but like one of the guys at Vandy, and his son is about to suit up for the Tennessee Volunteers. I find that hilarious. And then one thing I want to point out, this is also, he's already been committed. He already signed. But being from Alabama, there's a kid named Jordan Ross who went to Vestavia Hills High School who Tennessee has. And this kid has been signed since December. He committed back in August. And man, I wanted this kid to go to Auburn so bad, man. But Tennessee had been there since the beginning. He had always leaned toward Tennessee with Rodney Garner there, the D-line coach. He's just loved Tennessee. But this kid, I mean, this kid's going to be insane. So he's going to be an immediate impact player, I'd imagine. But he was so dominant at Vestavia. He was the number 9 player nationally and the number 1 edge in the country. He's relentless attack, dude. This kid just wins physicality. He's a force to be reckoned with. And the big thing about him, he doesn't really bite on eye candy. He's incredible at reading offenses. There's even been things that were said this year that he had been preparing so well for games against teams. He was able to call out formations before they were even lined up and certain plays to his defense against teams they were playing. He was literally calling out the plays and the formations they were going to line up against them and help out his teammates with that. And he helped kind of have Vestavia Hills have kind of a spark season. They've been kind of a middle of the road team in Alabama until he kind of got obviously there was a coaching change, but his presence alone helped that team elevate to a different level. But I mean, he's insane. He's going to add on to his size too, 6'4", 215. Once you get him in that college weight program, oh man, he's gonna get huge. Don't take that out of context. And then the Under Armour All-American game, he had 2 tackles, a tackle for loss, and a forced fumble, which also got him a little more buzz nationally after. I mean, he is the number 1 edge. But for people who don't follow recruiting as much, who were able to find out about him. But this kid's probably going to be a top 10 draft pick. And I think he should be talked about more nationally. Obviously, he doesn't play a flashy position. The edge is a flashy kind of position defensively, but he's not a quarterback. He's not a receiver. He's not a running back. But you got like elite talent coming into Knoxville with Jordan Ross. This kid is a machine. And congratulations, Tennessee. I know you've already had him and you've probably already talked about him, but I just want to highlight this for other people. This Jordan Ross kid, go watch his tape. Oh my God. You will want that kid on your team immediately. But congratulations, Tennessee. Incredible week you've had going. Incredible week, incredible portal class, very underrated portal class. Great recruiting. Like I said, Heupel is putting in work. All right, now we got the right fit at Kansas State. Dante Cephas has committed to Kansas State. Happened a few days ago. He transferred into Penn State from Kent State after his coach left at Kent State. He ended up going to Penn State. Looked like it was going to work out well, especially with Drew Aller. The situation was going to do well in Happy Valley. But, I mean, if we're being honest, he wasn't that special this year. But when he was at Kent State sophomore, he had 82 catches for 1,240 yards and 9 touchdowns, which was big. A little fall off the next year, but he was still a great receiver. But the big thing about him also going to K-State is his former receiver coach from Kent State, Matthew Middleton, is now the Kansas State wide receivers coach. And I think a big reason that he didn't work out at Penn State wasn't him. I don't think it was him at all. And I think this is huge because this is a massive position of need. And I can't talk about that enough for Kansas State this year. This is a huge addition, especially when he's going to be comfortable with the position coach that he excelled under. So I think it didn't work at Penn State because they had the 77th overall passing attack last season. And let's just be honest, the James Franklin passing attack is not threatening at Penn State. And this year it was flatter than a 10-year-old Pepsi. It was just nothing. And Drew Aller, I thought he was going to have an incredible year. He still is probably going. I think he's going to shape into a great quarterback, but it wasn't like he was insane. They were just kind of like that team that you knew was better than all the teams not that great last year. I don't know what that sentence was, but they weren't threatening. I think he just ended up going to the wrong place, but it was a good program. Looked like they were going to have a great year, which they did. They just can never get over the hump of the 2 teams that are better than them, basically, in this modern era. And he just went there and the passing attack's flat. You can't do anything under the James Franklin passing attack. I mean, you've had great players come out at receiver from Penn State, but that was more so that player being so insanely athletic and great at his position rather than the Penn State passing attack actually being great. So him going to K-State, I think this is huge for Kansas State. The position of need really helps Avery Johnson as well. This is great. This is good news for Kansas State fans. All right, the elite wide receiver is back on board with the Tide. Ryan Williams recommits. The 8th player nationally, number 3 wide receiver in the class of 2024, over 4,600 all-purpose yards and 65 touchdowns in his last 2 years at Maryland. I've seen this kid play a lot. He's insane. Fluid footwork, incredible speed. Kind of like I don't want to say it because people are going to be like, I hate when people make comparisons to other players who are really good. So I'm not going to do that. Actually, I don't want to do that to the kid. I don't think that's ever fair to do to a player, but I mean, he's going to be an NFL wide receiver. He's going to be a Sunday wide receiver. He's the Gatorade player of the year in Alabama, back-to-back years. He was the first sophomore to win Mr. Alabama, which is basically like the Alabama Heisman or high school football Heisman. He's the first sophomore to do that. This was a huge win for Kalen DeBoer, but 2 things can be true at once, which is I want to point out about this is it's a huge recruiting win, but it's not like a huge, it wasn't super hard to get this, this kind of elite. This will be the easiest it will be for Kalen DeBoer to get this kind of elite talent because this kid was already committed and then he decommitted. Obviously, when he said when Saban, he caught him off guard when Saban retired when he saw it on social media, but he comes back pretty soon after DeBoer comes in. I think he knows the scheme that DeBoer brings. is perfect for him. He's going to get highlighted like crazy. So it's not like, I'm not saying DeBoer's not going to be able to recruit, because that's what a lot of people are saying with that point that I just made. I think he's going to be fine. Actually, he just had the kid from Centennial in Arizona commit to him 2 days ago, I believe. Noah Carter. Yeah. The number 8 edge in the country, which was a huge get out of Centennial in Peoria, Arizona. Yeah. Number 82 player nationally. So he'll be fine recruiting, but I don't think he's going to have Saban level recruiting. But what I want to point about why this is so huge as well, like I said, 2 things can be true at the same time. If this kid didn't go to Bama, he was probably going to come to Auburn. And with all the people you've already lost, if you lost Ryan Williams to Auburn, it would have just taken a lot of air out of the balloon even more. And you would have given him the Freeze 5, and you would have had all the elite wide receiver talent in one class at Auburn from the state. So you get to keep Ryan Williams, which is huge. This kid, I mean, he's going to be the highlight playmaker of this team. This kid is going to be an NFL Sunday receiver. You keep him at Bama. DeBoer's going to be fine. He's going to be able to recruit. I'm not saying he can't recruit. I'm just saying 2 things can be true at once. But this was a massive, massive, massive win for Caleb DeBoer to keep this kid on board. All right, Boise State. The Boise State I grew up, Boise State did just win the Mountain West Conference Championship, but I wrote here on November 12th, Boise State was 5-5. And it looked like they were going to have their first losing season since 1997. Yeah, that's a long time. Basically, my entire life. They fired Andy Avalos, and then they got the interim at the time, Spencer Danielson. He took over, became the full-time head coach on December 3rd. And then he basically pulled Boise State out of the mud, 3 straight wins, and then won the Mountain West Conference title. It looked like dark days were completely ahead in Boise, and then they hired him now. And within 2 months, you're conference champions with a coach who seems to get it. And you're on top of it in the portal. Like, he gets this era of college football. He gets Boise. So it's great to see this. And then before I even talk about the portal, what's happened for Boise State, you have Ashton Gianti, the Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year, staying one of the best, if not arguably the best, I've heard people say, in the country. 1,814 all-purpose yards, 3rd most in the country this season in 2024. And my favorite part from Gianti saying he's going to return, because he got money. He got money over these group of 5 schools. I'm scared they're going to become feeder schools, which even Jay Norvell, the Colorado State head coach, literally has said this, that he doesn't want the schools to become feeder school, like Colorado State to become a feeder school for like the Big 12, which is looking like for these group of 5 schools, just the way they've set up college football now. But he said the money wasn't everything for me. It was more about where my heart told me to go. And he also said that Danielson being named the head coach helped. I love that he decided to stay and commit to the place he was at where he's having success. He is the kind of player you want on your team, and he's going to help. I mean, Boise State isn't like, they're not down bad. It looked like it was going to be rough this year, but in terms of history, even with Brian Harsin, he was able to have success there. Boise State is a machine in of itself that Peterson ended up building there. Even before him, I can't remember the coach right before. I was too young to remember those days. But this is huge. And then 2024, you're defending Mountain West Conference championships. You have a ton of playmakers back, and you're getting 2 guys in the portal, which some people have heard about Malachi Nelson, but people who don't. You have Malachi Nelson, the USC transfer, who is the highest rated recruit in the school's history now, coming to Boise State. He was the former California Gatorade Player of the Year. He was a 5-star and the number 5 quarterback coming out of high school in the 2023 class. You lost Taylon Green to Arkansas. He was a great playmaker. But Malachi Nelson, you have 4 years of eligibility left. You have a guy looking to prove himself. Just didn't happen at USC. Obviously, Caleb Williams was there, but it just didn't. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't the right fit. And things happen, and then the people are like, oh, maybe he's not that good because why did he transfer to Boise State? I wouldn't hate on Boise State. I mean, this is a school. I don't get why people were saying, why would he transfer to Boise State? This is a school that is proven year in and year out. It's always successful. So I think you can take your offense to a whole new, just potentially elite level with Malachi Nelson. And then on top of that news, you also get Chris Marshall, the former 5-star, number 1 ranked JUCO player and previously 5-star prospect in the 2022 class, to come to Boise State. Now, he was at Texas A&M and Ole Miss before, had a lot of problems, got kicked off, disciplinary issues, ended up leaving. And then from some Boise State news that I've seen and read about, he knows this is basically his last chance. And he said he wants to prove himself, so he doesn't want to mess it up. And you're coming to Boise, like, you just added Malachi Nelson the number 5 quarterback in the country in his cycle, kid who hasn't really played, wants to prove himself. And then you add the number 1 ranked JUCO player, Chris Marshall. On top of that, Boise State returns 18 starters. 18 starters with elite portal talent. This is a college football playoff type team. If this all works out, if it goes as well on paper as it's looking, and it transfers with the playmakers, Gianti, Marshall, and Malachi Nelson, your offense could destroy your Mountain West Conference. I know it's gotten tougher through the years, and I don't know if you play at Wyoming, but that's like one place you never want to play at. That place, and I know you have a tough out-of-conference schedule, but all you got to do is be the highest-ranked Group of 5 team. I think they have to play Texas, and then they have Washington State and Oregon State as well. I think Texas and Oregon State are away. I think they have Washington State at home. I could be completely wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's right. But either way, you're looking at a team, if as long as Liberty, they have an easy schedule again next year, I think, and they're primed to probably just run the Group of 5 with a easy strength schedule. But either way, Boise State, this is looking like a college football playoff type team next year, and if not next year, then the year after. With those 4 years you have with Malachi Nelson, which if he's really good, it won't be 4. But this is setting up right now to where Boise State can be back. The Broncos are going to be back, baby. Last thing I want to talk about is Will Rogers has returned to Washington. The right situation for both the player and team after DeBoer announced he was going to Bama. He entered the transfer portal. Fish is back, or Fish goes to Washington. He announces he's coming back. For those who don't know fully, Will Rogers is number 2 in the SEC's all-time passing leader history. And this past year, I don't know if this was necessarily true. I read this the other day, that Zach Arnett, the coach who ended up being moved on from at Mississippi State, who was the defensive coordinator under Leach, and after Leach's unfortunate passing, became the head coach. He apparently told Will Rogers that they weren't going to move away from the air raid type system, which they completely did, which completely ruined his game and threw everything off for him. And kind of his name was up here, and then people kind of forgot about him because the whole thing just, which was, I don't get why defensive coordinators that end up getting jobs do that. They just flatline the offense, especially in a system like that, where all those players are there specifically for that system, which is no wonder why you look awful this year. But felt bad for him with that. But he's an incredible QB. I think the change of scenery will help. And Jed Fish's NFL experience is another big reason why Will Rogers is staying. And I put right situation for both player and team because it's a bridge situation for both. He's going to bridge them into the Big Ten and give a ton of veteran experience, not worried about big games, physicality. And honestly, even this talent-depleted Washington team, not fully talent-depleted, but they've lost a lot, could be better than any team he had at Mississippi State. So he's going to help them bridge into the Big Ten. He's going to help Washington bridge into the Big Ten, and Jed Fish is going to help him be the bridge to the NFL. So that's huge for him. Either way, like I said, great for both sides. I hope we get to see him back being the just dart dealing QB he was, because when he's on, he is on, and he is so much fun to watch. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this college football content. Little longer video than I wanted to normally do today, but that's just kind of how it ended up being. A lot of information I just wanted to get out there, but a lot of information I felt like should have been talked about, and I hope people enjoy. Like I said, if you want me to talk about anything, leave it in those comments down below. And this is the last setup for this studio look. I'm completely redoing this room, got a new setup coming in. So the next episode, you will probably see a different backdrop unless it takes me forever to build. I got one of those raising desks where you can press the button and it goes up and down, and I could completely build it wrong, but we'll see. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend.